Welcome to this edition of Decryptage. We are pleased to receive the Africa50 Chief Operating Officer. With her, we discuss issues related to Africa's energy transition and the challenges facing Africa50 in mobilizing financing for the continent's infrastructure. Madam Tshepidi MOREMONG, welcome to Africa24. Africa50, an infrastructure investment platform backed by the African governments and promoted by the African Development Bank, has held its 2024 General Shareholders Meeting in Madagascar. Why did you show interest in this Indian Ocean country to host this event?
So, Madagascar for us is a shareholder, key shareholder, has been with us from the beginning. Importantly, Madagascar is the fourth largest island in the world. When you look at the biodiversity, it's one of the most biodiverse on the continent. But I think fourthly, and especially where it concerns what it is that we do in our mandate, is the potential for renewable energy on the continent is significant, right? And how Madagascar can contribute to providing access to energy to the millions of Africans on the continent. So for us as Africa50, it's really around how do we work with the Malagasy government in capitalizing and exploiting the renewable energy potential on in the country. And secondly, how it is that we can support them as a shareholder country in several of the infrastructure projects that they've prioritized from a strategic perspective.
AFDB estimates the Madagascar's renewable energy potential at 7,800 megawatts of hydroelectric resources and 2,000 megawatts of wind power. The country's ambition is to increase renewable energy to 85% of its electricity mix by 2030. Do you think this is an achievable ambition?
It is achievable. I think anything with the right political will, the right players around the table, is achievable. And from our General Shareholders Meeting, which was held under the high patronage of His Excellency President Andry Rajoelina, there was clear commitment from the government to say, we're here, we're working with partners, we want to work with more partners, both from the public sector and the private sector, to achieve many of the aspirations that we've set for ourselves, to be able to drive and achieve the vision that they've set as a country, specifically around renewable energy. So as you saw also during our annual General Shareholders Meeting, several agreements were signed, many of which are around renewable energy. So Volobe hydropower plant, 120 megawatts of hydropower in the continent, which several players are coming together on this. We had USDFC signing an agreement, technical assistance agreement with the project company. So that helps from a project development perspective, getting the project development elements underway. Right. We also had the EU Commission signing agreements with the project company, with the various players, including Africa50. So all of this, what you're seeing is the public and the private sector coming together to ensure that we can actually execute on this project. Importantly, contribute and support the vision that has been set out by His Excellency the President.
The international climate discourse is now recommending this investment in fossil fuels in favor of renewable energies. Some African leaders believe that Africa should be able to exploit its resources, particularly hydrocarbons, to finance its development needs. What is Africa50's point of view on the implementation of the energy transition in Africa?
So I think what we need to be very careful about in our conversation and focus on is a just energy transition. And we're talking about a transition. As a continent, we're talking about 600 million people who still do not have access. So as Africa50, for us, what's critical is what is the cleaner fuel that one can use to transition? And gas and natural gas for us is a non-negotiable. It's something that we need to use for us to transition. It's critical for Africa's industrialization, the contribution when one moves away from heavy fuel oils to natural gas is significant. So for us, for the continent, if one is looking at a just energy transition, it's really important that we make sure and see how we can utilize cleaner fuels such as natural gas.
Africa50 was set up to provide innovative financing mechanisms for infrastructure in Africa. In this context, Africa50 is the sponsor of the Kigali Innovative City KIC project in Rwanda. Why did you join this initiative, and when should KIC be operational?
Why did we join the KIC initiative? I think one of the things we spoke about earlier is vision, right? So His Excellency President Kagame has a vision for Rwanda and the continent being exporters of technology, not just consumers. So the vision of KIC was born, and as Africa50, as an instrument or tool for our shareholders, we decided to partner with the Rwanda Development Board on this. So Rwanda, and through Kigali Innovation City, looking to develop technology, drive innovation, not just in Rwanda, but on the continent as a whole. KIC is an ecosystem, right? A multi-use, multi-sector ecosystem for bringing together education, so academia, bringing together technology, bringing together the latest technologies, AI, etc., and seeing how it is we can develop relevant solutions for our continent. And we seem to talk about, I think too often we talk about infrastructure without the human face to it. So we talked about the fact that the financing gap is about $120 billion a year, the annual financing gap. But what does that mean, right? What does that mean for our continent, for our people? How do people use the infrastructure? So I think this is really something that when one talks about, yes, there's this financing gap, but what does that translate to, right? We've got 600 million Africans who still don't have access to energy. We've got 400 million Africans who still do not have access to clean water. You know, we talk about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. How is it that we as Africa50 can contribute and support to accelerating that so that the 1.3 billion people on this continent have access to goods, have free access to movement across borders efficiently and effectively. So it's important as we talk about infrastructure to bring in the human face to it. And that's what we're trying to do as Africa50, really accelerate the implementation and execution of infrastructure on the continent, working together with our country shareholders and working together with the private sector.
What are the challenges faced by Africa50 in mobilizing financing for African infrastructure, and what innovations are you exploring to surmount those challenges?
Mobilizing capital on the continent is difficult, but in the past several years, I think globally it's also been quite difficult. The geopolitical tensions that we're facing, inflationary pressures, the various wars that are happening, and just the diversion of FDI from the traditional sources has not been there, right? And the fiscal constraints that many of our governments are facing. So for us as Africa50, critically, it's to look internally. So how is it that we can drive the mobilization of domestic capital? The AFDB estimates that there's about $2.3 billion of assets under management by pension funds, by asset managers, by insurance companies on the continent. So we just need a small portion of this to be able to be invested into infrastructure. And we're very excited. At the end of last year, we had our first close for one of Africa50's vehicles, which is the Africa50 Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, where we're able to get to a first close of $223 million, 16 African institutional investors. So these are pension funds, social security funds, insurance companies, commercial banks coming together and saying, we do see infrastructure as an investable asset class. This was huge. This was historic. And one of those 16 investors was the African Development Bank, which has been critical and has been playing a leading role within this, and an international institution, which is the International Finance Corporation. So we're very excited. To us, this is a continuation of a journey where we're working with multiple parties to see how we can drive domestic capital mobilization, obviously together with global, but as they always say, charity begins at home.
Madam Tshepidi MOREMONG, thank you for answering our questions. Dear viewers, thank you all for following us. Find the full program on My Africa 24 and Africa24TV.com.